Everything you've been told about the T-Rex is a lie. We call him the king, the apex predator, the undisputed ruler of the Cretaceous. We've spent millions of dollars on movies and museum exhibits dedicated to the idea that T-Rex had no equals. But for 20 million years, the T-Rex was actually a subordinate. It was small, it was fast, and it was living in total terror of a rival so powerful, it literally stopped the T-Rex from evolving. You've never heard its name, but this is the monster that kept the king in his place. To most people, the history of dinosaurs is a flat line of giant monsters all living at the same time. We imagine T-Rex fighting Spinosaurus or Giganotosaurus in an endless battle for supremacy. But the reality is much more complex. Evolution is a game of musical chairs, and for the vast majority of the age of dinosaurs, the Tyrannosaur family didn't even have a seat at the adult table. 95 million years ago, North America was a very different place. It was split in half by a massive inland sea, creating a continent known as Laramidia to the west. This was the cradle of the T-Rex, but if you traveled back there, you wouldn't find the 7-ton titan from the movies. Instead, you would find creatures like Moros intrepidus. This was a tyrannosaur, yes, but it was the size of a human. It was covered in feathers, built for sprinting, and weighed about as much as a large dog. It was smart, it had keen senses, and it was terrifyingly fast. But it was an underdog. Why? Because the apex slot, the role of the heavy hitter that kills whatever it wants, was already occupied. For tens of millions of years, the throne of North America belonged to a group of dinosaurs called the Carcharodontosaurs. These were the shark-toothed lizards. And the greatest among them in North America was a newly discovered nightmare called Ceyx micororum. Ceyx is a name that comes from Ute Native American mythology, referring to a man-eating monster that hid in the shadows. It is a fitting name. When paleontologists found the first fossils of Ceyx in Utah, it changed our entire understanding of history. Before this discovery, there was a massive gap in the fossil record. We knew Tyrannosaurs started small, and we knew they ended up huge, but we didn't know what was holding them back. Ceyx was the answer. Imagine a predator over 30 feet long, weighing 4 tons or more. While that is slightly smaller than a full-grown T-Rex, you have to understand the timeline. At the time, Ceyx was prowling the forests of Utah. The T-Rex ancestors were barely 100 pounds. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't even a rivalry. It was an occupation. Ceyx was the glass ceiling of the Cretaceous. To understand why Ceyx was so effective at suppressing the T-Rex, we have to look at their biological weaponry. If a T-Rex is a sledgehammer, Ceyx was a scalpel. T-Rex is famous for its bone-crushing bite. Its teeth were thick, like bananas, designed to withstand the pressure of snapping a triceratops's spine. But Ceyx didn't hunt like that. Its teeth were thin, curved, and lined with razor-sharp serrations. They weren't built to crush. They were built to slice. When a Carcharodontosaur like Ceyx attacked, it didn't need to grapple with its prey. It would launch a high-speed strike, sinking those serrated blades into the soft tissue of a herbivore, and then simply step back. The victim wouldn't die from a broken neck. It would die from catastrophic blood loss and hemorrhagic shock. This bite and withdraw tactic allowed Ceyx to take down prey much larger than itself, including the massive long-necked titanosaurs that lived alongside it. Now, imagine being a small ancestral T-Rex in this world. You are fast and you are smart, but every time you try to move into a new territory or hunt larger prey, you run into a Ceyx. In the world of biology, this is called competitive exclusion. Two species competing for the same. Resources cannot coexist if one has a significant advantage. The Ceyx held the heavyweight niche so effectively that the tyrannosaurs were forced to stay in the lightweight niche just to survive. They became specialists in hunting small, agile prey that the giant Ceyx was too heavy to catch. This created an evolutionary stalemate that lasted for millions of years. The tyrannosaurs were essentially locked in a state of arrested development. They couldn't get bigger because the moment they started to grow, they would come into direct competition with a predator that was already a master of the giant slayer role. The T-Rex wasn't the king. It was the underdog, waiting for a chance that might never come. But then, the world broke. Around 90 million years ago, a series of geological and climatic shifts began to transform the planet. The Earth was warming. Sea levels were rising to their highest points in history. The lush, swampy floodplains that Seats called home began to disappear. In the world of evolution, being a specialized apex predator is a double-edged sword. You are the master of your environment, but if that environment changes even slightly, you are the first to suffer. The giant Carcharodontosaurs were specialists. They needed huge amounts of meat and specific types of prey to maintain their massive bodies. As the ecosystem shifted, their prey began to vanish. And just like that, the empire of the shark-toothed lizards collapsed. They didn't go out with a bang. They faded away, leaving the forests of North America eerily quiet. This is the turning point in our story. This is the moment the power vacuum opened. With Seats gone, the glass ceiling was shattered. For the first time in 20 million years, the Tyrannosaur lineage had no one to look up to. There was no one to hunt them, and more importantly, no one to steal their kills. What followed was one of the most explosive growth spurts in the history of life on Earth. In a period of just a few million years, a blink of an eye in evolutionary time, the tyrannosaurs began to balloon in size. But they didn't just get bigger, they got better. Because they had spent millions of years as underdogs, they had already developed high intelligence, long legs for running, and an incredible sense of smell. Now, they added size and power to that toolkit. They began to evolve the bone-crushing bite that would eventually define the T-Rex. They grew from 100-pound scavengers to 2-ton hunters, and eventually to 7-ton kings. The T-Rex we see in the movies is the final result of this frantic race to fill the empty throne left behind by Seats. We don't talk about Seats because its fossils are incredibly rare. We have thousands of T-Rex teeth and skeletons, but only a handful of bones from the era of the shark-toothed lizards. This gap in the fossil record allowed us to believe that T-Rex had always been the boss. But the rocks tell a different story. They tell a story of a survivor. The T-Rex didn't become the king because it was inherently the best dinosaur. It became the king because it was the most adaptable. It waited in the shadows, it survived the reign of a superior rival, and it seized the opportunity when the world changed. When you look at a T-Rex skeleton today, don't just see a monster. See a success story. See an animal that spent millions of years being bullied, hunted, and suppressed, only to rise up and become the most famous predator to ever walk the earth. The king is dead. Long live the king. But never forget the rival that kept him in the dirt for 20 million years. Because without Seats, there would be no T-Rex. The T-Rex didn't win the throne by being the strongest from the start. It won by being the last one standing. It reminds us that history is written by the survivors, not necessarily the ones who were strongest in the beginning. But even after the T-Rex became a giant, its troubles weren't over. It eventually faced an enemy that could snap its neck in a single blow. And it wasn't even a meat eater. If you think the battle between the T-Rex and Seats was brutal, you need to see what happened when the king met the tank of the Cretaceous. Click the video on your screen right now to see the only fight the T-Rex actually feared. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the monsters that time forgot. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.